Joining me now is David Parker, Labour's finance spokesperson. Hi, Mr. Parker. Thanks for coming in this morning.
No problem.
There is the dilemma, isn't it? If you lower power prices, then you lose the dividend.
Yes, you do, but the underlying point of principle here is, are power prices fair? We don't believe they are. There's three main reasons for that. We don't think that the market's competitive. We think people are effectively privatising water values, and we don't think the pricing model is fair, where everyone gets paid the same amount even if their generation costs are low. So we think that people are paying too much. We've said that we will change that it's time to acknowledge that the model is broken, and that will reduce prices by between $230 and $330 a year.
And as David Shearer said this week, the Crown will forgo dividends and tax revenue, though.
That's
correct. How can the country afford to do that?
Oh, the net cost of the Crown's around $100 million. It's actually a bit less than that. We can afford to do that out of budget lines. Yes, it is, because it's not like the money disappears from the economy, just that people have more money in their pockets, and instead of spending it on inflated power prices, they're spending it somewhere else in the economy. Okay. So the economy overall actually improves, and we've got modelling to show that.
Last year, through dividends and tax, the dividends and the tax generated $420 million for the economy. That's a lot, an enormous amount to forgo.
You ask yourself this question. We've just been through a recession. Power prices still keep going up by more than inflation. The government rips out more than $500 million of extra dividends from these companies. This is the national government.
Pretty difficult economic times.
Yeah, so what's that? How's that an excuse? That makes it even worse. People are struggling, and the government takes an extra $500 million out of this at the cost of people's power bills, which keep going up. Look, there's one thing that's clear here. If we get into government, Kiwis' power bills will go down. National's saying, no, they're happy with the model. They're happy for those power prices to keep going up. It's a stark difference.
Why didn't Phil Goff agree to that then, before the last election, if it's so important?
He agreed that we should be taking lower dividends. He also pointed out that if you privatise these companies, you're going to be increasing their profit motivation, and they will be pushing up prices even more in order to extract greater profits. OK,
so you're going to remove quite a lot of money, potentially here. $420 million is what? Pumped back into the economy. Well, that's what Shearer said. You know, no tax revenues, no dividend. Where are you going to get that extra money from then? Because that's a massive hole.
The next cost to the Crown is less than $100 million, because the money is respent in the economy. So there's no loss of tax. There is some loss of dividend.
I don't understand how that calculation works.
Well, if you've got $100,
explain to me how it works.
If you've got between $200 and $300 more in your pocket because your power bill is low, what do you do with it? You save some of it and you spend some of it. So you might spend some on, I don't know, some alterations to your house, or on some more food. So the people that sell food have a bit more revenue and they pay a bit more tax. So the net cost to the economy is actually that money goes around and the economy improves.
But if you're in government, you're not going to get that $420 million.
Not only does this reduce power prices, it improves the economy.
You'll have to generate extra money, though, won't you? You have to generate, what, through taxes, through user charges? How are you going to generate the extra cash?
Government revenue goes up by about $500 million a year. Just through inflation. The budget allowance for each year that the government has is about $800 million extra a year. We'll be paying for it out of that budget allowance. Look, you know, you can't say, look, we've got to overcharge people next year just because we overcharged them last year. That's not fair.
That's not my argument. My argument is I don't understand where the extra money is going to come from. I don't understand the equation of how this works, how this is better for the economy.
Well, I do. The money that goes into people's pockets is spent by them in other parts of the economy. So there is no less tax revenue.
The Crown is... Well, it's $420 million through dividends and tax revenue. Shearer said it's all gone. We'll forgo the lot.
Well, yes, we lose dividend revenue.
And tax revenue?
No, we actually get more tax revenue. The net cost to the Crown is modelled. It's been put out in the papers and it is credible. It is around $100 million per annum. Go back to the fundamental point. Should people face ever-increasing power prices, they've gone up by $700 since the so-called Bradford reforms, over and above inflation.
Phil Goff said in that clip that we played from 2011, he said the revenue from the dividend is used for hospitals, it's used for our education system.
Well, it won't be now because they're being privatised.
So will our education system then, and the sick, be essentially subsidising cheap power for the masses here?
No. At the moment, what is happening is people are subsidising power companies because they're paying too much for their power. That's what will stop.
That's how it is. That's just as simple as that.
Well, it is. One of the other accusations being made about it is you hear from the government that this is Stalinist. You know, the land of the free, the United States, does not let people get gouged for their power. They regulate prices.
I'm not sure we want to be economically comparing ourselves with the States. Though, that's not the ultimate model to follow.
Well, Well, actually, in this area, they're actually better at regulating monopolies than we are. They are better at that. Can I also say that this idea that we're no longer going to have competition in the market is wrong. What we're saying is there is inadequate competition in respect of pricing all the electricity at the same price, no matter how much it costs to produce. But we're going to be increasing retail competition, which is one of the problems.
There'll be no competition among the generators, though, will there? And more bureaucrats?
There will be competition for every new power station. Because that will be done by tender. So, no, it's not right to say there will be no competition. There will be more competition at retail. OK,
this new policy and essentially runs counter to what you said back in 2006. You said a single buyer would likely result in higher capital and operating costs. So what's changed in the last 6-7 years? In 2007, we just fixed one of the glaring problems in Mr Bradford's reforms, which was that we had unregulated lines companies, which are absolute monopolies. We also had very tight power margins. And it is true that when you go from the transition of the current model to the single buyer model, you have a period of investment uncertainty. At the time, New Zealand had perilously thin generation margins, perilously. Cabinet was reviewing this weekly. You talk to the people in Meridian or Transpower, their worry was keeping the lights on. And we didn't think that we could, at that time, put at risk security of supply for a 2-year transition period. Times have changed since. Some of the things that we did at that time worked. We've got better margins. Can I also say that since then, of course, that's what, 5 years ago? Since then, every year, power prices have gone up by more. Since then, we've had that WOLAC report from that international expert pointing out there were $4 billion of super profits. Times have changed. How long have you been working on this policy?
Me personally, off and on over the years, I've been working on this since 2006, 2007, to be honest.
This specific policy?
Well, the options that we have to improve our electricity system, yes. This specific system, pushing it forward to the last month.
Pretty much a month. Was it a Greens policy that Labor jumped on?
No, it's actually an absolute coincidence that we put out a press release last week saying we were announcing this week. They then phoned us and said they had a plan for this week. We got together and we found our plans were very similar. You weren't comfortable appearing with the Greens, though, alongside us here on the programme? We didn't want it to be thought that this is Greens policy. This is actually independent Labor policy. The Greens, I think, have a similar view in respect of theirs. They've arrived at a similar conclusion independently of us. OK, well, the Greens say, and I'll quote here, that the critical components of their plan neatly align, they say, with Labor's plan. There is a significant difference here, though, isn't it? Because the Greens want a dividend and Labor doesn't. No, actually the significant difference lies in their add-on to what we're proposing, which is progressive pricing, which has some energy efficiency advantages but some equity concerns for us. They want a dividend. Can you work with them on this, though? We think that power companies should earn a profit and pay a dividend. We're not saying that they should be driven to extinction. But then Shearer said he'll forgo all dividends and all tax revenue. He said that. That's a quote from him this week. No, that's not what he said. What he said is in the financial statements that we put out with this, they assume that during the start of this, the Crown has to forgo all dividends. And the press statement, Mr Parker, he did say, and I quote, the Crown will forgo dividends and tax revenue. So you're saying you do now want a dividend? Said all dividends. So he didn't say all dividends. Well, that's a bit ambiguous, isn't it? If the Crown forgoes dividends and tax revenues. It's absolutely obvious that if these companies can't charge as much, then they can't pay as much as dividends, and that's the point that he was making. OK, so can you work with the Greens then? If they say they do want a dividend, you say you want, what, some dividend? Can you work with them? Are these policies as neatly aligned as the two of you suggest? Look, the fundamental changes here are we agree prices are too high and that Kiwis' power bills are too high and that they should go down, that we need to change the pricing model so that we live in a country with low-cost generation. We've got some of the lowest geothermal, lowest hydro prices, cost of generation in the world, and yet we don't see that as consumers. It's not right. Is this a genuine economic policy, Mr Parker, or is this a stunt to derail asset sales? This policy decreases people's power bills, increases the number of jobs by 5,000 to 10,000. Where do those jobs come from? Because they're just bureaucrats, aren't they? What rubbish! Well, tell me, how do you generate 5,000? That is such rubbish. Jobs. OK, tell me how I'm talking rubbish then. Because the extra money that people have in their pockets is spent into the economy. OK, but I want to know where the jobs, where are those 5,000 jobs going to be? Those people are employed in the businesses that people spend this $200 to $300 million extra in every year that is in their pockets because their power bills go down. Are they going to be working for New Zealand Power? No. How many are going to be working for New Zealand Power? Oh, about the same that there are in the current regulator. OK, this is a high stakes game that you're playing. Look at what's happened with Trustpower.
and Contact Energy. Look at what's happened on the share market.
I think Contact shares changed price yesterday by 1.7%. I don't think that that's the end of the world.
Down by more than 4 is our last reading of it.
Yesterday they went down and then they went up a bit. Contact Energy are not going to go broke through this.
Also it's having an impact on KiwiSaver. What's happening with the fluctuating prices?
We had all these arguments with Telecom. You can't touch us. You can't touch us. It's all fair, they claimed. In the end, New Zealand saw that it wasn't fair. They realised they were being overcharged for their telephone services. The same is true in respect of power. And part of it's at generation, part of it's at retail, part of it's the way in which the government keeps clipping the ticket on transmission.
Is this what we're seeing now, final policy? Is it absolute final policy, or are you going to give it a few more tweaks, do you think?
We're absolutely committed to this. We're convinced that we haven't got a sufficiently competitive market and that there's a need to improve competition at retail and get the single buyer in the middle so that when hydro is produced cheaply, it's priced more cheaply into the market and averaged by the single buyer with more expensive stuff like gas-fired generation.
Finally, Mr Parker, where does this policy now position Labour? Does it essentially position Labour to the left of where Helen Clark positioned the party?
No, you know, I'm actually
we're renationalising a competitive market.
We're not. I'm an absolute defender of competitive markets. They efficiently price goods. That's why the price of bread is always relatively stable. If someone puts the price of bread up, someone else comes in and competes and charges a low amount, so bread never goes up in a ridiculous price. We haven't got true competition here. The Americans know that if you haven't got effective competition in markets, you cannot rely upon competition to control price. New Zealand does. It's wrong because we haven't got a sufficiently competitive market.
All right, David Parker, Labour's finance spokesperson. Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.